everyone.
Oh, so fancy.
There you are. Yay, it worked.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even know what was going to happen. I was like, oh, I hope this works.
This is the first time I actually did a live. Usually it's like when I do lives, it's usually the other person initiating it and me joining it. So I'm like,
Okay.
oh, I hope I do this right.
Perfect.
How are you?
Good.
So for those who don't know, I'm Diana and this is Melissa. Let's see if I got it right. Muscedere? No, I did it wrong again, didn't I? Closer, right?
Muscedere.
Muscedere. I don't know why.
Muscedere.
And I even said to my husband, he's Italian. I'm like, how did we get this wrong? No, how did you get this wrong?
You know what? It's quite possibly the most butchered name. Easily, the only place that people know exactly how to pronounce it is when we're in Italy. And it's funny because one time I was on a plane and they were looking for me because of my luggage or something, and they called my name, and I was laughing because I was like, oh, is that me? I was like, nobody's ever pronounced my name so well before.
I get the same thing with my last name. It's Becciavello. I get Besavello. I get all kinds of things too. So I understand. But I'm like embarrassed for my husband that he couldn't figure it out, right?
Happens.
Anyways, I already popped open your wines. I was already enjoying them, just FYI. But we'll get to those.
I opened
right?
all of mine too. I needed to taste them. I had to make sure I didn't have a flawed bottle.
Of course not, right? You don't want that. So tell me a bit about the winery in the wine region, actually.
So in terms of the winery, we are in Ontario's most southern appellation. So we are in Lake Erie North Shore. So we are right between essentially Windsor and Point Pelee. So we're right on the border with Detroit. So down here we have about 18 wineries right now. But they're all very good wineries down here. So in terms of us, we are one of the smallest. We produce about 3,000 cases a year, but we sell everything straight out of this retail store. So you won't find any of our products on an LCBO shelf right now. So right now, if you like something of ours, you have to either come here or you have to go onto our website to get it. So in terms of that, so we do 3,000 cases a year. We have about 85% of our crop is coming from here. We bring in the last 15%. And that's who we are in terms of production size.
And the area in general, like I've been to the area and I did actually a wine kind of tour. We biked around to all the wineries, which was really, really fun, except it was very windy. And it was like, okay, I don't know if we're going to make it.
Oh yeah, the wind here is like gale force.
Yeah, it was crazy, but it was so much fun. It's beautiful. All the wineries are very unique. All have something different to offer. And that region, from what I understand, it's situated at the same latitude as the Mediterranean. So
yes,
how does
we are on this? Yeah,
right?
you're gonna say exactly where it is. Name it. You're studying this right now. You know this better than me.
Actually, interestingly, none of this is actually in the W set.
Okay.
So I'm actually doing an Ontario course as well, learning about VQA and all that. So this is where I'm getting it from. But it's one of the newer VQA regions. Is that correct?
So we're not one of the newer. Prince Edward County is actually newer than we are.
Okay.
So it's arguable, whatever that word is. Anyway, who came first, Niagara or actually our region? So down here we have Pelee Island Winery. And Pelee Island Winery is actually one of the oldest in Ontario. So if you go back and if you ask potentially somebody from Pelee Island Winery, they could argue that we are older than Niagara, but I'm not going to get into that argument because we planted in 2002. So we're young, we're small, and yeah.
But the region in general, wasn't it like a tobacco industry?
So the region in general, it wasn't. So tobacco was a little bit further north than us. So
Okay.
I guess if you look at kind of the way the North Shore of Lake Erie looks. Windsor's down here, and then it kind of like cliff hangs up. And so we're right here, right at the end where Kingsville is. And if you go further north, kind of more like where Port Dover is, Norfolk County, they were completely a tobacco area in the past. So down here, there is a lot of cash crop farmers. There was a lot that was being done residentially, but there wasn't a lot of grapes. So prior to our opening, so we planted in 2002, and my brothers actually noticed what was going on in the region in the late 1990s. So what happened is they noticed that kind of wineries were popping up. So in terms of our heritage, our parents are Italian. Our Nono in Italy managed vineyards his whole entire life. So my dad was retiring at the same time. So my brothers go to my parents, well, let's plant 5 acres and see what happens. So in Ontario, in order to open a winery, you have to have 5 acres of grapes in the ground. So in 2002, we planted our first 5 acres. And what we learned is our site here actually grows reds really well. So what we did in 2007 is we did another 7 acres of reds. So we focus on reds. So what you would find down here in terms of a region is you will find it, I would say, a little bit more red dominant. So in terms of a growing season, I like to call us Canada's Florida, except for in the middle of the winter when it's freezing cold. And I don't know why I live somewhere where my skin hurts. But we are Canada's Florida. So in terms of a growing season, usually our bud break will start end of April, beginning of May, depending on the season. This year we were crazy early because we had that kind of early spring. But then the biggest problem you had is you could have the onset of frost. So we all have wind machines that did help us all to not essentially lose crop. And then, so we started our season basically the end of April, beginning of May. And usually our growing season will go till the end of October. So we do have a little bit of a longer growing season than the rest of the Ontario wine regions. So you will see a lot more reds coming out of Lake Erie North Shore.
That's interesting because geographically speaking, it's located far south as Northern California and the Tuscany region of Italy, right? Yeah. So like, I mean, in terms of growing and what you can grow, it's probably very different than Niagara and Prince Edward County itself. I think we're freezing.
I would say it's like we have basically all the same grape varieties that they have in Niagara. You'll find everything very red heavy though. With our Cab Francs in Lake Erie North Shore, you'll find them more medium body. We're going to taste a Cab Franc after, whereas with our Cab Sauves, usually our Cab Sauves are heavier, more jammy, more body, just because our Cab Sauves will hang till the end of October or the beginning of November some years. So we can get the higher sugar levels. So I would always say Lake Erie North Shore really tries to push the envelope, especially when it comes to reds.
Well, I love the area and I can't wait to come back. I was supposed to come back last summer.
We want everyone to come back. We want to be open and,
And we want you to be open. It's a nice weekend getaway. Sure, it's a little bit of a drive, but I think it would make a nice getaway to visit all the wineries because I think we're kind of spoiled. We didn't even I didn't visit the area until I think it was 2 years ago. And I'm like, how does this exist? How did I not know there were all these wineries here, right? Like, I think, we're used to Niagara and Prince Edward County is quite a drive, but people forget about, and it's such a great getaway and so many great wineries and things to do in the area. So tell me, how did you and your family in Italy, but as a woman, hopefully she'll connect. Oh, internet problems. Well, hopefully Melissa will be able to connect back again. Let's get Melissa back on here again. There you are. Oh, fun
Sorry, you know,
times.
my
Fun
poor
times.
rural internet here
It's okay.
is
We
questionable.
understand. I think all
My
internet right now is questionable because like we seem to be on it all day, right?
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay. Um, okay, so your last question. You were breaking up, so
Cutting
I
out,
didn't even.
yeah. So obviously your family was in winemaking, your nono in Italy, and your
Yeah.
brothers decided to start here. How did you decide to get into it?
Well, funny you should say that because what happened is we actually planted when I was in high school. So with that said, we moved to the middle of Essex County between my grade 11 and 12 year of high school. So I had grown up in the city. My parents moved me out to the middle of the county because they were planting grapes. And I thought this was the worst thing
Crazy,
ever.
right?
Why would
Why?
anyone want to do this? Who wants to
Yeah,
go in the middle of the field and do this work? So I would say at the beginning I was forced into it. And then essentially what happened was we live on site where essentially the winery is. So throughout university, I was going to the University of Windsor. I was doing my degree in biochem, and I would be coming back here at night, but I would be checking fermentations. I was doing field work. So I was doing work in the vineyard. I was doing production work. And then once we opened, I was doing sales stuff at the same time. So, I mean, I was hands on with all of it. So since I was hands on with all of it, I kind of grew, like that passion came to me as I was learning it hands on. Um, further to that, everywhere I travel now, we hit up a wine region. So wherever we are, we will find a winery, regardless of how far we have to drive, and we will learn everything about that winery. So we'll always try the varieties we know. So my bad habit is I always try things I know first. So if they
of
have a
course.
Merlot, if they have a Cab Sauv, if they have a Cab Franc or Riesling, if they have a variety I know, I'll always taste that because in my head, I like to benchmark. So
Yeah,
I know what I think things taste like. So I like to see that. And then we'll always ask, what do you do well? So we always want to try what they're telling us or what they think we should do. So yeah, so I kind of got forced into it at the beginning, but by being so hands-on with it, I kind of grew that passion, and now I'm furthering that passion through essentially everything I do. And now I forced all my friends to love wine, and it's
that's
great.
amazing. That's amazing. Like, I mean, basically forced, but not, but still loving it, the family
Yeah,
business and
exactly.
wine. Like, I mean, how can you hate that,
Yeah,
right? Although I'm
exactly.
sure there's a lot of work that goes into it, behind the scenes that we don't see. We enjoy it, drinking it, but we don't
I
know
call
what
it
really
our
goes
labor
into it.
of love.
Yeah, and
It's a labor of love.
there's a story behind every bottle of wine. Same
Oh,
grape,
100%.
different story, right?
Yeah.
So how would you describe you as being a woman in the wine industry?
So it's funny because the industry, I would say, for the most part, is very, very male dominant.
Definitely.
Regardless of how you looked at it,
Hmm.
from winemakers to salespeople to basically a lot of the jobs across like a vineyard, a winery, they're all pretty much male dominant. So it was funny because we started off and I was relatively young. So I started working basically our retail store at 18 with my Smart Serve.
Wow.
So I will never forget my first run-in was actually with Conrad Edgebitch. And anytime I see him now, he will bring up the same story over and over again. But I remember it to this day. So we were doing a wine tasting event and he came up to get wine and he gave me his glass like this. And I, being the dumb 18-year-old I was at the time, I grabbed his glass like this.
Oh no.
Well, boy, did I learn that that's not how you touch anyone's glass. That to this day, I would never touch the bowl on anyone's glass. So it's funny. So, I mean, I started off young, so I was kind of introduced to it. And being a woman in the industry is kind of cool because you're offset from a lot of the males. The other thing is it's funny because me and my brothers will taste wines together all the time. And you even look at like my palate versus one of my brother's palates, and there's so many differences between like a male dominant palate and a female dominant palate.
Definitely.
So I would say for a lot of like aspects when it comes to a winery and when they're blending and everything, they're going to look at a male perspective and a female perspective because a lot of times they're completely different. So when it comes to wine, I always say the female likes the prettier, cleaner thing, whereas a male would always choose a more, I would say, robust or oaky or tannic thing. And you kind of need, when it comes to wine, you need like that happy
balance.
You need that happy medium. So I think there's a good place for women and for men, and I think they just kind of need to be integrated together.
I totally
and you're
agree.
starting to notice a lot more females. So
yeah, I didn't realize how many actual female winemakers there are, and just females in general, especially in Ontario, which I think is amazing, right? It gives me shivers. I'm like, yay, women, go women, right? And totally the palate thing, I totally see it with my husband when we drink. We're drinking the same wine, and he'll say something like, I'm totally not getting that. I'm totally not getting that. And he's like, I'm totally not getting that. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know. Like, I mean, I guess it's subjective too. Like, I mean, my palate might be different than someone else's, but interesting that I've read that as well, where men's palates, women's palates are a little bit more finer, I think they say, than men's palates, like you said, more robust things, and we like more of the prettier tastes, whatever, right? So it is very, very interesting, right? And so I guess you were accepted into the wine world very with open arms, and you being young, 18, like you said, being very young. And touching people's bowls.
Oh yeah. Anytime I see him now, it's hilarious because the story will come up and I'm like, yeah, that was me.
Stop reminding me, right? I've come a long way. But how would you to know, right? Like, I mean, it's not like you had any formal training or anything like that, right?
No.
You know, so what? So what do you do in the winery? You do everything? So you make the wine that we're tasting. Did you make it?
I did have a part in it, yes.
Awesome.
I would call myself Jill of all trades.
Awesome.
So we're small. As I said, we do 3,000 cases a year. So we all wear a lot of hats. So I spend time in the vineyard, I spend time in production, and I essentially spend time in sales. So with that said, when I talk about wine, it's not, I guess, like book knowledge. It's more
awesome.
I was digging in the dirt with the grapevine, so I know what the dirt was that we planted in. And then when it comes to the production, like I know what the grapes were picked at. I essentially know what went into them. I know that all of our reds we ferment in half-ton bins instead of in massive tanks. So we want the greater skin to juice ratio. In terms of our barrel aging process, our blending process, I'll always have a part in that. And then it's funny, as I said, like a lot of the times me and my brother are tasting and like you notice that difference between the male and female dominant palate. And then the best part of all wineries is always the sales part. So the dealing with people part. And that's funny because that's usually what people think is the easiest part. And I would say it probably is. The retail store, like this part, is the funnest, easiest part. Everything else is like actual work.
It's a lot of work. Yeah, definitely. I've seen some behind. I've never been part of it, but I've seen it, and I've seen people in motion. I'm like, oh my God. A lot of people don't realize what actually goes into a bottle of wine. And I think if people really step back and thought for a minute, what actually goes into one bottle of wine and the cost associated with it and everything, I think people would have a little bit more appreciation. There's a story behind every bottle of wine and labor of love and everything, right? So what are you best known for? Like, I mean, what are your top grapes or your top wines?
I would say our most so we are a little bit more of a red geared winery than a white geared winery. On the
Yeah.
red side, I would say our two most popular reds are going to be one our Cab Franc, so we're going to taste that one, and then our other one would be our Cabernet Sauvignon. So those are two of our most popular. We also have Syrah planted on site. Our Syrah is relatively popular. So with that one, usually we get a good kind of black spice character on that one. So I would say that one's relatively popular, but the Cab Franc and Cab Sauv always kind of outweigh it. The other thing is for the past few years, Rosé has been one of the number ones. And I don't know if it's just the Rosé all day thing, but ever since we started, we've always done a drier style rosé. So nothing that we really have here is on the sweet end. So I would say everything we've done is on the drier end, and our rosé is a drier style rosé. So we always compare it to more of your Southern France style of rosé. So the rosé that we're going to taste does have about 10 grams of residual sweetness on it, but it's got so much acidity on the finish that you almost can't even
out. Yeah. Well, I opened it and I went, whoa, the aromas were amazing. Like, okay, this is going to be good.
Yeah.
So do you still grow? I read that you also do some Northern Italian varieties.
Yeah. So we also have a Barbera and a Nebbiolo planted. So with this last bottling, we actually bottled our first of the two. So we bottled a Nebbiolo and we bottled a Barbera Cabernet Sauvignon. So the thing with Barbera is a pile of acidity. So they're both going to be 2017 vintages. We haven't released them yet. We're going to release them in the next few months, just because they need some bottle time.
Right.
But Barbera is a pile of acidity. So we put the Cabernet Sauvignon in essentially to kind of balance that out. So we got a really good blend there. And then we also have a Nebbiolo planted. So we picked those two varieties because essentially we kind of looked at what our growing season was. So we do have that little bit of a longer growing season. So we do kind of go into November. We start a little bit earlier. And that is what those varieties needed. So those varieties need our longevity. So we're usually harvesting those when we're harvesting our Cabernet Sauvignon. So we look at our 13 acres of grapes, and those are the last three things left in it in terms of harvest. And then we bottled two 2017 vintages, and we're in 2021 now. So they just have so much tannin on them that they kind of they needed aging time. And then we did get a crop. We have an 18, and then we'll have a 20. We have a 2020 that we had just harvested that's in barrel now.
I think they're going to be very interesting to try. I think so. It's going to be very interesting to try and, you know what I mean? Yeah. So tell me, which one should we go with first?
We're going to start off with the Riesling. So we're going to start off with this one. So it's going to be our 2020 Riesling. So with this one, we haven't released this one yet. We will be releasing this one in about a month or so. Usually when people see Riesling, people think of an excessively sweet wine.
Absolutely.
As I said, in terms of all of our wines, nothing's going to be on the really sweet end. So with this one does have about 11 grams of sweetness in it, but it will have a lot of acidity on the finish. So with that acidity, you almost don't notice the sweetness. So you'll get a lot of your kind of lemon, citrus notes on it. Perfect pairing for a spicy dish. So if you're having anything with a little bit of a kick on it, the Riesling would go pair nicely with it.
See, I love that it's not super sweet. I have a very sensitive palate with sweetness. I find for when I read a wine and I see like the residual sugar on a wine is really high, but it's marked as dry, I'm like, for me, like to me, it's very sweet. I'm like, how is this dry?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it's just my palate, right? But I like that these are like low in, residual sugar and still have the acidity to balance everything out. Like I tasted them all before because I had to, right? And of course I had
you had to
Cabernet Franc for dinner.
What did you have for dinner?
So my husband decided to make seafood. I'm like, no, I'm not having seafood. I'm having this wine tonight. I could have had, I guess, the Riesling with it, but then he made some pork chops for me. and it
Okay.
balanced. It was nice. It was nice.
It
It
went
wasn't
very
foam.
well.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was very, yeah, it was actually the wine. I started drinking it before I ate, and it was very nice. I'm like, as soon as I opened it, I'm like, oh, the aromas on it were amazing. But even this has very nice aromas on it.
Yeah.
Oh. And how was this made?
So with all of our whites, are usually picked around 18, 19 in terms of sugar level. So essentially what we're aiming for with like our Pinot Grigio and our Riesling especially, usually an 11.5 to 12% wine. So we don't want anything that's too high in alcohol. We usually make them relatively light body, so they're just nice, like patio sipping wines, poolside wines, something that can pair with food, but something that can be enjoyed alone. So with the Riesling was picked at about 18 bricks. And then we essentially always have to look at acidity on Riesling, because the acidity on Riesling always is kind of your differentiating factor. So essentially everything white, we hand harvest everything from our vineyard. So everything white comes into the winery, goes through a destemmer, does exactly what its name says, shoots out your stems, leaves you with the skin and juice. And then all of the whites will go into stainless steel tanks, and they go through a cold ferment. So they go through a cold ferment, and then essentially what happens with whites is everything we pick in September and October gets released the next spring. Whereas with our reds, everything that gets picked in September and October, in December will go into barrels, and then will get released a year to a year and a half or 2 years later.
Well, yeah, this is a perfect time to release this. It's perfect for like the weather now. And I think
Yes.
this is
Well, here
perfectly.
it's pouring rain right now, like
Oh no.
pouring.
Are you gonna get the
Pouring.
same heat? Are you getting the same heat wave that they're calling for here in Toronto?
Yes, we are getting a heat wave next week, which will be beautiful. So
And it's bring out the Riesling and the rosé, right? And like, I mean, I think this would be
exactly.
great with a spicy dish,
Mm-hmm.
or a little bit of something, a little bit, even like a creamy pasta dish. I think this would
Yeah.
be really nice with the acidity of it would really, I think, work well. I really like the flavors of it. Like, I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
getting some peach and pear. Again, I
Yeah.
compare with my husband. He's like, no,
Yes.
I'm not getting that.
No, you are. Listen, I always tell people wine's really subjective. That's why
Yeah.
a lot of times with wine it's funny, right? Because we'll have people that'll come in and they'll ask which wines won awards. That's all I want to taste. And I was like, awards are nice, yes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was like, something could have 5 medals on it, and your
And you still
palate
like
might
it.
just
Yeah,
not like that.
exactly.
So it's so subjective. So I always tell people, when you go to a winery, when you go somewhere that you have an opportunity to taste everything. Taste all of the wines that you would probably never try, because you never know essentially what you're going to find. We were in Nashville for my 30th a few years ago. And when we were in Nashville, it was funny because, again, we find wineries everywhere we go.
Yeah.
And we went for a wine tasting right before a whiskey tasting. We did it the right way.
Perfect.
So we go for this wine tasting, and the guy goes, okay, would you like the sweet flight or the dry flight? And I'm like, oh, I'll take the dry flight. And one of my friends said, like, I'll take the sweet flight. So I tried my dry flight, and I was like, these are all sweet. Like, these are not dry. And then I tried her sweet wines, and I was like, oh, I was like, these are really sweet. And he goes,
Sweet,
well,
yeah.
you know, he goes, those are the type, he goes, that's our market here. He goes, these are our drier wines. He goes, they're
Oh,
not dry, but they were drier than the sweet ones. I was like, okay.
this is not dry. See, that's how my palate is. I find when I see a sweet,
Yeah.
dry wine and I taste, I'm like, I'm not getting like, I'm not
Yeah.
getting this dry from it. But that's just
Yeah.
my palate, right?
Yeah.
I just seen a question come in here, and I think we might have answered it. They're asking how big your winery is in terms of acreage, and what are your main varietals and your flagship wine, and also what makes your wine unique, and is there a special technique you use for your white wine?
Oh my gosh, that's a huge question. I don't even
Yeah.
remember what the first part was. Okay. So we
So
are
the acreage,
relatively
yeah.
small. We have 13 acres. that we are producing from right now. We do about 3,000 cases a year that we're selling straight through this retail store. 85% of our crop comes from here. We bring in about the last 15% of our crop. So that's who we are in terms of size. What was the next part of that question?
So you wanted to know
the flagship wines.
Yeah, what makes your wine unique, and is there a special technique you use for your white wine?
So I would say what makes us unique is that essentially, number one, when you come here, you're going to run into one of our family members.
Awesome.
So you will find one of us here. You will generally find one of my nieces and nephews here as well. They're all getting older now, but they do still spend a lot of time here, and you will find them basically doing a lot of work on site that needs to be done. I would say the youngest one of my nieces and nephews right now is the one that probably spends the most time here, and he has the knack to know, like, oh, why is Nono's tractor doing this, or why is that? Like, he looks at things, I would say, a little bit more differently. But that might just be because he's the youngest and he hasn't gotten older yet, but we'll see.
That's amazing, though.
So I would say one of the uniquest things is that you will find one of us here. So you will always find essentially a family member on site. The other thing is since we are as small as we are, especially with our reds, if you read the back of any of our bottles, we always put total production on our bottles. And the reason we put total production on our bottles is because we want you to see just how small our lots are. So the Cab Franc that we're going to taste is 400 cases, which in the grand scheme of things is nothing. The Rosé that we're going to do next is going to be 260 cases, and then the Riesling is only 160 cases. So we're very small batch.
That's such a great, I love that little fact.
So
you know? That's amazing.
Since we're small batch, we're able to be essentially more hands-on. So we kind of thrive off small lot, big characters. So we're very small. And then that's why I always say, if you read the back label, you'll see what our total production is. And right now we're producing, hold on, I have to count because I don't even know. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we have 12 wines for sale right now. So we, like, our biggest production is this Cab Franc, which is 400 cases. But then everything else, like the Nebbiolo and the Barbera that we bottled, we did 42 cases of each of them.
Oh, so very exclusive.
Very, very, very small. So I would say that's what makes us unique. That's what makes us unique, is how small we are.
So Brooke says, best wine in Essex County. Thanks, Melissa and family, for amazing product. Oh, that's so nice.
Thank you.
So that was amazing. I really like it. And I really like the little detail on the back. And for people who don't understand, what does it mean to have VQA on your label?
So essentially what VQA is Vintners Quality Alliance. So you're going to see VQA a few different ways in Ontario. So the Riesling, you're going to read VQA Lake Erie North Shore. So when you see VQA Lake Erie North Shore, essentially that is telling you that the majority of the grapes that went into this bottle are from this appellation. So they are from Lake Erie North Shore. When you see VQA Ontario on a bottle, that could mean that I got grapes from another appellation. There is a deviation in that, though. So the rosé that we're going to try next is VQA Ontario, but it is 100% crop from our vineyard. The reason the VQA Ontario comes in is because it has a hybrid grape in it. So we blended Vidal into our rosé. So it's a Vidal Cab Franc. So since it has a hybrid grape in it, you can't use a specific appellation. You have to use Ontario. So we couldn't use Lake Erie North Shore, even though it all came from Lake Erie North Shore. When you go to Niagara, you'll see VQA Niagara, VQA Niagara Peninsula, Beamsville Bench. You'll see Prince Edward County in Prince Edward County. So Ontario has its separate DVAs, and that's just showing you where the grapes are coming from. From the most part, if I get grapes from another appellation, in Lake Erie North Shore, I'm not going to write VQA Niagara on my bottle. I would put
Right.
VQA Ontario instead of
Right.
VQA Niagara.
That makes sense. So when you write VQA Lake Erie, does 100% of the grapes have to come from Lake Erie, right?
It's
Or
85 or
85%.
90.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like you have like, or maybe you have a 5%, but those are 100. They all came from literally my front lawn.
Yeah,
So
it's
those are,
interesting to know because, like, I mean, VQA is like not all wines have the VQA label, so it's interesting. Like, I didn't know the full extent of what it meant until, again, doing my studies and really going into it, right?
well, I will give you another perfect example. So I have a bottle here, which is our newly bottled Barbera Cabernet Sauvignon. And when we look at this label has no VQA on it. And
Okay,
the reason it actually has no VQA on it is because Barbera was not a VQA-able grape.
right,
So
makes sense.
since Barbera was not a VQA-able grape, I couldn't apply for VQA on it. So
But that totally makes sense. Yeah,
it's just Ontario's way of kind of a standard set of regulations.
yeah,
If you go to Italy, you'll find your DOC or your DOCG, and everywhere has kind of their own system.
yeah, exactly. And I just thought it was interesting. Again, I just happened to be reading about it before we did our thing. And I went, oh,
Yeah,
that's so interesting. I said, you learn something every single day, right? And I'm
yeah.
sure a lot of people didn't know that. I'm sure maybe a lot of people did. But let's go with the rosé now. As you could tell, I
Okay,
already had some.
perfect. So with the rosé, as I said, rosé, one of our most popular. So with this one, this is as I said, Vidal Cab Franc blend. So it's a bleed of our Cabernet Franc. So essentially, when I say bleed, um, what it is we put our Cab Franc through the destemmer, shoots out your stems, leaves you with the skin and juice. And essentially the first 15-20% of juice that we could siphon off of the skins, we will ferment as a white to add into our rosé. So essentially it's the colors coming from that limited skin contact that we have.
Okay.
So essentially when you squeeze any grape in our vineyard, be it a red grape or a white grape, the initial juice that comes out of it is white. So
Right.
all of the color on red wines is coming from the skin.
So they're
So
all
this one
pressed
is,
separately?
yeah, so this one is going to be a Vidal Cab Franc. As I said, with this one, does have 10 grams of residual sweetness. But for a rosé, I tell people all the time now, if you're going out to eat, don't order a rosé because you think it's sweet. Rosés are all over the board now because a lot of
Totally.
people are going to a drier style of rosé. So with this one, 10 grams of sweetness, but it will have relatively high acidity, again, like the Riesling. So with that, you're not going to notice so much of the sweetness on it.
So I
So
find the trend, of course, again, everyone's palate is different, but I find the trend is on the lower sugar side. People like the drier styles. And again, it might just be a trend because I'll have other people who will like, no, this is too dry for me. I need some sugar. And I'm like, okay, let's go for
well,
the 50.
funny because we opened in 2006, and ever since we opened, we have always been making a drier style rosé. Um, and I remember pre-COVID when we used to have like group tastings come all the time. We would always throw a rosé in as part of our like tasting, and you would always have the people, oh no, I'm not trying that. I don't drink rosé. And I'm like, no, like you have to try this. Like it's a little bit different. And they'd be like, oh, like this is dry. Like it's not sweet like I had expected it to be. So it's funny because we've always been making our rosés drier. And now it's kind of the trend. So yeah, so I do see a lot more sweet rosés. I mean, I do see a lot more dry rosés than I do sweet rosés.
Yeah, I think I have too. Of course, there's a balance, but it's interesting because, you know, men, some men AKA my husband won't drink rosé because it's a girl's sweet wine. But then he tries this and some other rosés. He's like, oh, I could totally drink this. This is totally a summer wine. Like, yeah, right? Oh, we're frozen again.
No, you're not. I was trying to plug my phone in and that just didn't work. I'll plug my phone in. Oh boy, I shouldn't have tried that.
Well, I feel like this rose, like, I mean, as soon as I opened the bottle, I got strawberries.
Yeah. So with the rosé, I would say it's all strawberry. My other great comparison on it is because I eat a lot of them, so this is how I notice this. But if you've ever had the sour watermelon slices, you know, they're like the sour watermelon slices. I really feel like this needs to be plugged in. Hold on.
You're Brittany dying.
Well, hold on. It's fine. I can fix this problem.
Sure, no problem. No problem.
I'll just, you know, walk around here, find myself a plug.
Why not?
Perfect.
Yeah, I really like the flavors of it. And like I said, when I first opened, I was like, wow, so like the aromas were beautiful.
So with that rosé, we bottled that one. We bottled that one May 17th. So it's recently bottled. So it is a new one. We were supposed to bottle significantly sooner, but those nice branded screw caps you see on them were stuck at a port in Germany.
Of course.
So we didn't have them to bottle. So we bottled that just a few weeks ago. And I would say so far, so good. It's going well in terms of sales. So our rosé has always been essentially one of our more popular wines.
Honestly, in only 260 cases, people need to order it and get their hands on this, right?
Well, I laughed because one of our regulars that comes to the winery, she goes to me she sent me a text today. She goes, did you sell out of rosé already? And I'm like, no, not yet. She goes, well, you warned me when you are. I'm like, okay. I'm like, it's only, what month are we in? It's only June. I'm like, we're still okay.
How about you just buy a case now and be safe, right?
Listen, I've had people do that, and they've had to because they're like, last year when I came, you were sold out. So this year I have to hoard it in my house so that I
That's okay. That's okay. It's okay to hoard
it's a good
wine,
problem.
isn't it? Right? So tell me, I know when I was there last in that area, a lot of the tourism actually comes from the States, from across the border, right?
Yes.
And are they able to order your wine? Or do they, like, I don't know. I remember when I went to the States, I couldn't order wine to be delivered home to Toronto, but I don't know how it works the other way.
So they can. Essentially, there are a couple wineries here that have distribution in the States. We don't. So hoarding equals aging. I love it. It's so true. You have to age it at your house because I can't age it on our shelves. So essentially the answer is no. So they can't order for delivery there because of how our shipping guidelines work. So if I want to sell wine in the US, I have to ship through a distributor to distribute that wine in the US.
Okay.
But we had pre-COVID, I would say we were at almost about 50% of our business was US. So we would have a bunch of people from Michigan, Ohio, they would just essentially come over for the day. Whereas then as soon as the border closed, literally 15 months ago, we lost that whole avenue of clientele.
Right.
And it was crazy because when we opened last summer, we didn't know if people were going to come. It was like, well, you closed the States to us. That was our biggest avenue of people coming. So who's going to come here? And it's funny because the one thing I would say through COVID is I saw more people from parts of Ontario that I didn't even know existed show up on our doorstep.
That's amazing.
Because essentially they were looking for, what can I do in Ontario and where haven't I been? So it was like, oh my God, there's this other wine region. We're going to go there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which was awesome. So, I mean, we saw more Ottawa, more Toronto. Honestly, I could go as far north as places I couldn't even name, that I was
Oh my
asking
God.
them if they had Costco stores and Walmart. And then I was like, oh my God, I sound like a crazy person asking you if you have like real stores there. But that was like it was crazy to me that we were finally getting all these people that would have never, had COVID not happened, stepped foot into our door. So my real question is what's going to happen now? Like, what happens post COVID? Like, will we still get them? Will we ever get our Americans back? Like, I don't know. We'll see.
I think so. I think Ontario, like, I mean, in Ontario in general, I think we're learning to appreciate our own province and Canada in general. But really appreciating our own backyard. Like, wow, Ontario, we have some fabulous wine, right? And being able to support Ontario wine has been amazing. And although we couldn't, necessarily drive there, and technically we weren't supposed to drive there, I guess we could have drove there for curbside pickup. I went back home.
Listen, I stopped asking questions.
Like really, at the end of the day, you know what I mean? I'm just doing curbside pickup and driving home. But you do deliver, so everyone could order online, right? And have it delivered.
You can order online, and you'll get it right to your door.
Which is perfect. So there you go. I love you. I love that you ship wines to my door in Ottawa. Perfect. There you go. See? All the way from one end to the other end.
I totally agree with that. I never had an appreciation for Ontario wines till last year.
It's true.
It's so true. I was on an LCBO meeting, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago. Maybe it was a VQA meeting. Anyway, I was on a meeting with, I think it was LCBO. And they were shocked because, VQA wine sales were, I'm not saying they're doing fantastic, but they were doing better. And it's funny because two of the biggest sellers in VQA wines were Rosé and Cabernet. So it just kind of tells you where the trend is. So.
Well, it's great that there's more options. Like, I mean, whether it's buying at the LCBO or directly from the winery, you know what I mean? So if we can't get it at LCBO, we'll just order from you, which is perfect, right? Yeah. And like, I mean, there's nothing better than drinking a bottle of wine from somewhere and escaping to Italy or France or whatever. But again, Ontario wine is amazing. And to be able to drink wine, like, I mean, I have so many people I'm Croatian, my husband's Italian, and they want to taste Canadian wine. I said, well, I'm coming and I'm bringing you Canadian wine. So I'm going to bring them your wine.
I'm coming to Croatia with you.
Come with me. I'm going to
It's on my list. It's one of the places, it's one of the European countries I haven't been to. So Croatia.
Well, they're accepting tourists right now.
That have 2 vaccinations.
So they're accepting, obviously, with vaccinations, and they're accepting if you, of course, have a negative test. If you don't have a negative test, they'll test you at the airport, and you have to quarantine until you get your results back. So there's various options if you want to travel, if you feel comfortable traveling, of course, right? And I have a lot of people who want to come too. Let's all go. And let's all go. Big wine. Trip. Sasha too, yes.
I can't leave till November though. I need to finish harvest.
November is actually a very good time to go. Okay, we're going to talk after this.
So it's funny because my parents always, right after harvest, my parents will leave. They'll go to Italy till about Christmas. And what I was doing the past few years now, pre-COVID, because I didn't go anywhere last year, is I would just fly back and just kind of either stay there for 10 days or one of my friends would come with me. And that's how we ended up doing like Spain, France, like that's how we ended up doing these other countries, because we were piggybacking off another like Italy trip in November. And the nicest part of, I don't want to tell people the nicest part about traveling in November, because now everybody's going to steal my month.
It is the best time, honestly. It's like, it's quiet. It's still like in Croatia. It's
you could
hot.
Sightsee.
You could swim.
And not be like,
exactly.
It was nice.
Exactly. I was in Italy it was end of October and it was perfect. I'm like, Where are all the tourists? I'm like, it is end of October, but it was the perfect time. Definitely.
Yeah.
So, okay, we're going to talk.
Like
So
I've done Italy in August when it was 170 degrees
too
and
hot.
my flip-flops melted downtown Rome. Like it's not enjoyable anymore. It's just
And then
not.
with a million tourists, right? All trying
Yeah.
to take a picture of the same thing.
Yeah, but I can say when we were at the Louvre in front of the Mona Lisa and there's 5 million people there trying to take a picture of a picture this big, I was
Yeah.
really.
But you know, you have to, right? Like, this is what you do when you travel.
Mhm.
You have to get your shot, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Your memories. It's all about memories, right?
Yes. Cab
I'm ready for
Franc.
the next one. Yes, I really love this one.
I have to
They're
reach
all,
over for all my wines here.
they're all amazing. Again, when I open them all up, I have. Oh, she wants. Is there a mixed case? Do you sell mixed cases?
So essentially, when you go on the website, you can mix and match
Whatever you want.
whatever you like.
Perfect.
Yeah, you
Perfect.
make it your like it's your choice what you want to do.
That's amazing.
Um, okay, so next up we have Cab Franc. With Cab Franc, uh, Cab Franc, I always call our little sister wine to Cabernet Sauvignon. It's not going to be as heavy as a Cabernet Sauvignon, especially in Lake Erie North Shore. More medium body, good kind of pasta pizza wine. The thing with Cabernet Sauvignon is they have Cabernet Sauvignon everywhere. So they have Cabernet Sauvignon in France. They have Cabernet Sauvignon in Italy, Cabernet Sauvignon in California. But you will see single variety Cabernet Francs coming out of these areas, but for the most part, they're using Cabernet Franc as a blending wine. They're not doing a
Right.
single variety out of it.
Okay.
So with this one, we are doing a single variety Cab Franc. So we do everything as a single variety. The only blend we actually do on the red side is our Meritage, which is a blend of Cab Franc, Cab Sauv, and Merlot. So our single variety Cab Franc, as I said, medium body. With this one, a lot of your kind of raisin, blackcurrant notes
Mm-hmm.
on it. It will have a year of oak, but all the
Yeah,
oak
I
we're
get
using
that.
on this is used French oak. So we use the oak more so as an aging aspect rather than, oh my God, this is like a fully oaked wine. So we want you to get a
Mm.
little bit of oak kind of subtly, but we don't want you to be like, oh, this is a really good 2x4 that I'm
It's not
drinking.
overwhelming. It's definitely not overwhelming,
Yeah.
but I do like how it gives it that flavor. There's a question saying, is wine available for curbside pickup? There is, right? Perfect.
Yes, Natalie. I already knew it was her.
Awesome. Yeah, I like I could smell I could say the oak on it. I like oakiness and I like that it's not overpowering though.
So now that I know that I can make my own mixed case, I need to know the best dress. Um, so my favorites would be, I would say, hands down the rosé, great summertime wine.
Hmm.
If you're looking at whites, the Riesling isn't going to be a very sweet white. Drier
Perfect.
style, just enough sweetness to balance off the acidity. So the Riesling's relatively popular. We also have a Sauvignon Blanc. Our Sauvignon Blanc is a little bit different for Ontario. So a lot of times out of Ontario, you get more of that gooseberryness, whereas New Zealand, you get more of the grassiness, whereas ours is almost kind of the in-between. So it's got some of the gooseberry notes, but it also has those earthy notes on it as well. So I would say the Sauvignon Blanc's relatively popular. And then red side, I would do this Cab Franc, so good medium-bodied wine, something you can drink alone. I'm noticing still a lot of the tannins on it.
Hmm.
I mean, this was bottled 2 weeks ago, so it is still somewhat young. On the red side, I would also do the Cabernet Sauvignon, so more full-bodied. If you like a blend, the Meritage is a blend of Cab Franc, Cab Sauv, and Merlot. And then my other red choice would be Syrah, but that one's just the most different, and you have to like those black pepper notes on it.
So all very
I
unique.
hope that answered their question.
So just order one of each, basically.
It works.
Right? There's
It
your
works.
case,
Yeah.
you know? Like I like this. It's like not overly, like you said, you're not using new oak, so you're not getting
Yeah.
that full oakiness on it. You're still getting some
Mhm.
tannins on it. I'm getting some berry flavors from it.
Yeah. So it's
A little,
very jammy. I would say a lot
yeah,
of berries on this one.
yeah, a little bit of smoke on it, but it's
Mhm.
very, like I said, I started drinking it before I ate anything, and right away, again, when I opened it, I'm like, you know, just at first,
Mhm.
someone says that they love your Sauvignon Blanc. It's their favorite for the summer.
It's been very popular in terms of the summer. We have our new 2020 that'll be out soon too. So,
Oh, that's amazing. So everyone should know that they could order all your wine on your website,
yep.
and they could check your page for your website. And
hmm
is there a minimum order?
So the minimum, you get free shipping if you buy a case. So if you buy 12
Well, that makes
bottles, you do
sense.
get free shipping to your door. If it's less than a case, you do essentially pay the shipping. We are not shipping Canada Post because they are a complete disaster. So I usually ship FedEx to your door because I can find the package when I put the wrong address on it, which for you is exactly what I did.
I know.
Which is
Oops,
exactly
forgot
what I
the
did.
unit number.
That's fine. You know,
It's
I'm
okay.
so bad FedEx didn't call me and say, you forgot the unit number. Because that same week, I forgot to put somebody's address on something. But our
Oh,
FedEx guy actually looked at me and he goes, Melissa, you forgot the address. So I'm like, oh,
oh, that
okay.
would probably help. Yeah, probably.
No. So yeah, so essentially the minimum is that if you want free shipping, you have to order a case. If it's less than a case, you just pay the shipping to your door. If you're here locally, you could do curbside pickup. You can come in to pick up bottles as well. And
Perfect.
hopefully within the next week or so,
I
Dougie will
hope
let us
so.
reopen. And
We're
then yeah, we'll
technically
open our
allowed to leave our
patio.
homes now.
you you can come and sit out on the patio. We have our wood-fired pizza oven that's always popular. So we have a lot of families that will come out. I see people from literally newborn to 100 years old here.
That's
So you see
amazing.
kind of like all walks of life. People will bring their grandparents, they'll bring their children. It's literally a wide open outside space.
I really love the area. Like, I find it's very laid back. It's very, a lot of
Yeah.
families. Like, I went to quite a different wineries, and I'm pretty sure I came to your winery, to be honest. Like, I mean, there were so many, like, it's just a whirlwind, you know, we try to hit up so many
Mhm.
places, but it's just very laid back and comfortable, and everyone's
Yeah.
very welcoming. So definitely recommend, once we can, and they're allowed to definitely
Yeah.
go out and visit you. But again, just to remind people who maybe signed in late, what is newly being released that people could order?
So newly being released on the website already is our 2020 rosé. Our 2020 Riesling will be up in about a month or so, and our 2018 Cab Franc I'm going to be putting up next week. So
Awesome.
we're just on the tail end of our 2017. If you do like Cabernet Franc, so our biggest downfall is we're this big. So since we're this big, especially on the red side, when our wines are like at their peak in terms of drinking time, I don't have anything left to sell you. So I would say our 2017 Cab Franc is drinking fantastically right now, whereas this 2018 still has a lot of tannins on it. So if you like Cab Franc, I would actually get that one right now because this one could still use a little bit of
You could
time to
definitely
mellow
age it.
out.
Yeah, for sure. It's still like if you open it up and
Yeah.
let it air out a bit, it would be fine. But
People can also, in the comments, if they want, like if they want the 18 instead of the 17, just if you buy the 17 on the website, just put, please send me 18, not 17. And I'll
oh, it'd
do
be
that.
interesting to taste both,
Yeah.
actually. It'd be interesting to
Yeah.
do a vertical
Yeah.
tasting and get the
So
17
some
and
people will do
18,
that.
right? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good idea, actually. But I love them all. Like, I mean, so the Riesling was fantastic. They're all fantastic wines. So I'd highly recommend anyone to. Oh, someone's asking, what Syrah, the 2013 or 16, or both? Definitely both.
So the 2016 Syrah I released 2 weeks ago.
Oh, awesome.
So it is still a little bit younger. It does have a little bit more tannin. It does have a little bit more ageability on it. The 2013 is drinking better right at this moment. So in terms of growing years, they're both relatively similar. So you'll get a good balance of black pepper to fruit forwardness on it. But the 16 will be more tannic on the finish. But if you're eating it, If you're drinking it with a steak or some kind of robust red meat, the 16 will balance out really well with it. So you could go either or.
So just try both, right? Ultimately, like, I mean, I think that's the best way to taste it, like, especially like, you know, from one year to the next,
Mm-hmm.
just to see the different flavors of it.
The
And I'm
funny thing
loving,
about the Syrah is, so she asked 2013 and 2016. Well, there was no 14 and 15
mm,
because if anybody could think back to 2014 and 2015, that's when we use the words polar vortex,
okay.
which are two words I never want to hear for the rest of my life
So
ever
what did that
again.
exclude then? What did that exclude for
Um,
that year?
so what the polar vortex did is that was our winter that we were bordering about minus 25,
Oh,
minus 26 degrees Celsius for about 6 to 8 weeks in the middle of the winter. So essentially when everybody thinks it's cold in the middle of winter, we're looking at what our buds on our vineyard can withstand. So
right.
that's our biggest stress, is always what's going on with the weather. And what happened in 2014 and 2015 is it was so cold in the winter. Syrah is our first variety that starts to die when it's cold in the middle of the winter because the buds can't withstand those cold temperatures. So with that said, we didn't have crop in our vineyard in 14 and 15. So if you came here, what had happened was all the vines started regrowing from the bottom.
Oh,
So it was like new growth. And 14 and 15, we don't actually have anything that's a 14 or a 15 vintage. That's
that's
our crop.
interesting. That's interesting, right? So then everything else is it's very special, right?
Yeah. So that's why we
Definitely.
have a 13 and a 16 Syrah and no 14 and 15.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to order them all and just try them all. Definitely. Well, hopefully everybody will order online and hopefully we'll be able to visit soon. I know that our orders of being in our homes has lifted. I don't know what goes on
Yeah.
beyond that. I think we still have to wait another 2 weeks or so, something like that.
Well, I thought there was going to be a hope that he said that step one was going to start earlier, but
It
so far that
should.
hope hasn't come yet.
You know, it is
Well, we
outdoors,
know this is
curbside pickup.
Ontario, so what he's going to say is, okay, step one starts tomorrow. Like
True.
tonight at 5 o'clock, you would say
No,
it
no
starts
warning. Exactly. No warning. You can't prepare. So basically, you need to be
like,
prepared for all of us to
yeah.
come over and get your wine, right?
Yes. Come eat pizza, come hang out on the patio.
Sounds like
Yeah.
a plan. I think I'm totally going to do it. And we're totally going to talk about November. Is there
Yes.
anything else you want to leave, our watchers or viewers with before we go?
Just, you know what? As I said, whenever you go anywhere and you have an opportunity to taste everything because you never know what you'll find that you're going to like. Um, Take advice from people because I always say it's sometimes the best advice. So if you're going to an area, ask friends about it. Ask friends where they would eat. Ask friends where they would go to. People's advice is usually the best advice. And yeah, once we open, come and see us. And we hope to see everybody down here in Lake Erie North Shore. And if you didn't know who we were, well, we hope you know who we are now.
Exactly. And exactly what you said about the try everything. Like, I mean, I didn't think I was a big Riesling person. Again,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know until you try it. You maybe try one and
Yeah.
whatever, but you need to try different wines from different regions because it is totally going to be different and everywhere you go, right? So why not be open to new
100%.
experiences, right?
Yes. Yes, for
Well, it
sure.
was amazing chatting with you tonight. I'm
It was
so
nice
glad
chatting with
some
you too.
yeah, so many fans here who love your wine, which is awesome, and they better get on and order the rosé before it sells out.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Awesome. Well, thanks for
Yeah.
having me. Glad we can chat and hopefully we see you down here soon.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Definitely we're going to connect, and as soon as we can, we're heading out your way.
oh, she doesn't like your Riesling comment.
I didn't, you know what? For me, it's a sweetness thing. You know, here's the thing though. I
Mm-hmm.
love ice wine, like that
Mm-hmm.
sweetness, but only obviously just a little bit. You know what I mean? It's not like
Mm-hmm.
you drink a full glass of ice wine, right? It's just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where, the Riesling kind of thing, the really, really sweet ones for me is like a little too much. Again, it's just
They're
my
very,
palate. right?
Yeah.
But the sweetness is not, I don't get that. It's beautiful. It's very easy drinking. It's not overpowering. It's not super sweet. And people are all coming. See, we're all going to Windsor.
Awesome. Perfect.
Awesome.
Perfect. Awesome.
Well, it was amazing. And we'll chat again.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you and
you.
have a wonderful night, everyone. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Bye.